Hey everybody, welcome to Grimsforge Gaming. Today we are covering my Magicka Necromancer, and we are running a ranged build, and we're going to jump right into the build here, and then after the build I'm going to share my thoughts on the class, and then I have some BG footage for you. So jumping right in, we are running 2 heavy, 5 light, and our 2 heavy pieces are going to be our scoria. I still have to, we're running training on this, but we'll get that transmuted at some point. So this is a work in progress. I just want to get the build out to you. Valken Scoria is pretty nice for a Necromancer. I am running a lightning staff and it procs often. Basically, it's 100% uptime. So every 5 seconds, you're going to have Scoria Meteor dropping as long as you're in the fight. And the damage on that will be anywhere from 3k to I've seen 6k on people. So that's nice. And it does splash damage as well. So um, second 5-piece set we're running is Brightthroat's Boast. And we're pairing that Brightthroat's Boast with our Witchmother Potent Brew, and so that way we hit our 5-piece on there. We get our max Magicka increased by another 1930 and our recovery increased by 1450. The next set that we are running is Spinners, and I think Spinners is probably a must. We're in a very tanky meta right now, and the only way to actually seal the deal on a lot of the kills, I'd say 50% of the kills, you're going to need penetration. Everybody's running around super tanky, and everyone has a lot of self heals right now. So you throw a healer into the mix, and you've got trouble. So you definitely need spinners. I opted to do the lightning staff. Um, it's helping proc Scoria, but it was a whole lot easier for me to use the lightning staff and maintain pressure on targets, multiple targets, just by holding it, plus holding the heavy attack, plus I'm getting Magicka back, and so it allowed me to stay in fights a lot longer. And so I definitely was liking that. We are running a resto staff on the back bar. So, and our spinner's lightning staff is Nirnhome for the additional damage with the shock glyph. Each one of our jewelry is spell damage. We're trying to basically push as much damage as we can with this build. And so looking at our abilities, this is unbuffed, and we've got Ricochet Skull, and the tooltip on this isn't too bad. And then on that third cast, it deals 20% additional damage and bounces up to 2 extra targets. So if you're fighting 1v1, you're going to get 20% more for that attack, but you won't get the bounce damage, so you won't get that bonus. But getting to that third cast is the thing. Lining up all your damage and trying to burst through somebody on this class has been tough. Anyways, Ricochet Skulls are primary spammable. We'll do a heavy attack into a Ricochet Skull or a light attack into a Ricochet Skull. And basically, also, I could build this class just like a Sorcerer, minus your streak. So we could be running Crushing Shock or the other morph, and we could shield stack, and we could run the Destro um, CC, and that might be something to do at some point to experiment with, but I was trying to keep this class's identity and use its abilities. What does a necromancer look like as a necromancer, not a necromancer trying to act like a sorcerer? So that was kind of the thought process, and that's why we actually ran with these abilities. Let's compare apples to apples and see how we hang. So our next ability is Stalking Blast Bones, and it's got a 2.5 second load time. So basically, after you summon it, it's going to be another 2.5 seconds before it takes off after the target. And if it doesn't have to chase the target, not jump to the target or close the distance to it, but if the target is running away, you won't actually see that bonus on the bottom. Every second the skeleton spins chasing the target increases the damage of the explosion by 10% up to a maximum of 50%. So And what I mean by that is I could stand at 5 meters from a target, and this is going to do the same amount of damage as if I was standing 28 meters away and cast it and the target wasn't moving. It's going to do the same amount of damage. Now, if on my 28 meters the target's running away from me, it'll do more damage to them. So that's important to know. You're not going to get notice, you're not going to get that damage bonus unless they're moving away from you. So anyways, it's got a 13k tooltip on it, and takes 2.5 seconds to get off to the target. My next ability that I'm running is Agony Totem, and I'd said this before, a lot like with Templars, you build your house, and you'll lay down your defensive rune, you'll lay down your cleansing ritual area, and that's where you're going to fight at. As long as you keep the fight in that area, you've got additional defenses, and you've got healing coming in probably, and from your and you're cleansing bad dots from you. This is probably the closest thing to a Necromancer's house, and it's the Agony Totem. And summon an effigy of bone at your feet that gives you minor protection. So you're taking 8% less damage, and your allies that are fighting it take 8% less damage, so that's nice. Minor protection is key word for that, and if wardens already have that if they're running a particular defensive setup, and so um, that's important to know that some classes won't actually benefit from that defensive bonus. Anyways, this also has a 2-second uptime on it. So if I'm in the middle of a fight, I have to drop this early, or preemptively I have to drop this and then engage in the fight. And because 2 seconds is a long time when you've got 6 to 8k weapon damage medium armor builds coming in and onslaughting you and dizzy swinging to execute, you're probably not going to be there after 2 seconds. But anyways, this is the best we've got, and to make the most of it. And I'm running braided tether on my front bar, and mostly because when you look at the class passives here, if I want to get some of these passives, I have to have one of these abilities on my front bar. It was easier for me to get braided tether on my front bar. I don't want to switch off my attack bar while I'm in my rotation trying to burn someone down to get a tether going. So it's really nice to have that on my front bar, and that way I can pull on these passives from this skill tree. Anyways, braided tether's nice. It's a free ability, and it's got a high tooltip on it too as well, but it's not. So for instance, this says 16, almost 17k health coming in over 12 seconds. It's not like 1.2 health per second, K health per second, 1,000 health coming in every second. It's actually cut down to even smaller increments than that. And actually, we could probably even show you. As soon as our ghost expires here. I don't want to risk unsummoning him and him not leaving a corpse there. So anyways, you can see those hots coming in just below, above my health bar. Sometimes they're critting for 9, 16, and then most of the time they're 539. It's pretty quick hot, and braided tether, I'm healing everyone in a group around me. So that's a pretty nice little heal, and it's free cost, so you can't really beat that. And we are running Elemental Drain. We need a form of Major Breach, especially for the tanky targets, and we also need Minor Magicka Steel, so that way we have Magicka coming back in. And my ultimate is Ravenous Goliath. I just recently made this switch to my front bar. I normally had this on my back bar, and I was looking to land Colossus every chance I got. But with just the playstyle and the way this build, or the way this class operates at ranged, I ended up relying on this Ravenous Goliath a lot more to be offensive, to be a bully, and to survive. And so this ended up being the primary ultimate of choice. So it's pretty nice. I'm not going to say you're unkillable when you're in Ravenous Goliath, but you're pretty darn hard to kill. And Moving into the back bar, we have a resto staff on our back bar, and so we're running rapid regen. Still leveling it here, but it's got a really nice tooltip. And an important thing to note for this: share your staff's life-giving energy, healing you or a nearby ally. And there's been times where I'm low on health and I absolutely need to heal, and I'll throw this rapid regen and it flies 28 meters and hits one of my teammates. And so it's important to know that this doesn't always, this might not select you when you need it. And so, anyways, next ability, Spirit Guardian. I like this ability. We have some health coming in every 2 seconds, and it's a pretty good heal. And this also comes with a flat 10% damage mitigation. The Ghost is sharing, or the Spirit Guardian sharing 10% of your damage coming in. You pretty much want to keep this up all the time, and it's a really nice ability. Fairly low cost. That's nice. And I'm also running Dead in Pain. This ability is nice. It's got 0 cost to it. You generate ultimate when you do this. Basically, when there's corpses on the ground, it'll consume the corpses. Their essence will fly to you, and you'll gain 2 ultimate, and you'll gain some health coming in, and then you'll also gain minor protection, reducing your damage taken by 30%. So this build that I'm running right now has a flat 33% or 43% damage mitigation, sorry, because at the bottom you see while slotted your damage taken is reduced by 3%. So this ability is 33% damage mitigation. Here's 10, so 43% damage mitigation. And damage mitigation doesn't really work like that. It's like not additive, multiplicative, and things like that. But at any rate, it's better to have than not. So also another thing too is every time you interact with a corpse, you generate ultimate. So you do generate good ultimate on this build. This generates ultimate. You want to make sure you use it regularly, so that way the corpse consumption passive is triggering, plus the ability itself generates ultimate. I had to throw a shield on for those moments where the melee guys are on me, and it kind of took the edge off the onslaught or the Dawnbreakers from the 6 to 8k weapon damage guys. Not a lot. Took off some of the edge though. And between, the damage mitigation and this, we were able to drag out, you know, situations like that to hopefully give my totem enough time to actually start triggering to buy me any type of breathing time to generate ultimate and get into Ravenous Goliath, so that way we could kind of fight back. So um, anyways, had to go the shield route. I did try heavy armor. I've tried multiple setups. I've probably tried 5 different setups, both in light armor and heavy armor builds, to see what was more viable and stuff like that. And really, this build is where I kind of came to be. We ended up at. We're running summoner's armor right now, and I wouldn't want to run the other one, beckoning armor, because that would call people to me. We're trying to keep fights at ranged, and not pull people to me, so this was the play on that. And if it weren't for us running Valken Scoria, I would probably drop this. I don't care about the cost reduction from this ability. The fact that I have to hit it every 20 seconds, and this class makes you work very hard to try and line up damage on people. Um, and the last thing I want to do is have to also keep this armor buff up. So if I didn't have to run Scoria, I would switch to a different monster set, Mighty Chudans, so that way we had that passive at all times. But anyways, that's where we're at right now. I'll keep playing with this. You can see we have I literally just leveled this guy up in Imperial City and in the sewers and PvP and BGs. And so I have not gotten Sky Shards. I've picked it. I knew exactly what I wanted to go for build wise. And now we're in game trying a bunch of different builds, and we're going to have to explore some different options. So The build felt very good leveling in BGs up until CP. Then you hit CP and you hit those 6 and to 8k weapon damage guys, and it, the world changes. So we're running Glacial Colossus, and I'll drop this on a group. There's very few. This ability applies major vulnerability, and there's very few abilities in the game that apply that. But when it hits those targets, they're taking 30% increased damage, and so you could line up some kills for yourself or for the team. Usually, most likely the team with this ability. But anyways, I like having that on there. I do also have animated blast bones. And I won't run this in the sewers, Imperial City or anything like that. I'll run it in BGs from time to time, and it's a pretty fun ability. If I'm back row and I got a good front line in front of me and my front line dies, I can res my front line, and you consume up to 3 of other corpses in the area and summon a blast bones for each corpse consumed. So it's a pretty cool effect, and so we'll run that in BGs from time to time. But I ended up finding this was, if my front line is good, and uh, this was needed a lot less than this. Plus the cost on this at 325 is pretty high. So anyways, another thing to note on this build is obviously in here we do not have any major prophecy in here to add spell damage to the build. We do rely on spell pots for this, and we're running the most basic spell pot. I'll probably make some more advanced ones right now. It hasn't been much of a problem really using that. And so right now that's working for us. If I had to drop anything off of here, I would probably drop hmm, I, I'd probably have to drop my shield, and that's where we would add degeneration from the Mage's Guild line. So for this, you want to make sure you get all your class passives as best you can for everything. And Destro, Resto, you want to get all those passives. So you can see my Resto's only 32. Like, we flew up to CP with this build. And light armor, we are 5 heavy, 5 light, 2 heavy. So you want to have all of your light armor and then the top 3 of your heavy armor. And we are not a vampire or werewolf on this build. And our race is a Nord. I feel like if you're going to be tanky, no matter what you're trying to do, whether it be ranged or melee, whatever, Nord is the class because of this rugged passive. That's 4k additional resistances, and that's needed. Also, here's another ult gen bonus here for a Nord stalwart. So you gain the stamina, that's great. I dodge roll from time to time, and I block cast on my back bar while I'm healing. But when you take damage, you gain 5 ultimate. So that's nice because both of our ultimates are fairly high at 250 and 225. So it takes us a little bit to get there. We need everything we can get. My thoughts on this ranged Necromancer. Let's compare a ranged Necromancer versus a ranged Sorcerer, okay? So, and I know that some people might be like, well, that's not fair. I know. I know it's not. I have both, and the Sorcerer is just super strong. But if we break it down to abilities, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take our Ricochet Skull, and we look at the cost on that. It's the same cost as your primary spammable for a Sorcerer. Maybe you're running Crushing Shock or the other morph. That's fine. The thing to note on this is slow. This ability to get to people is very slow. You could dodge this very easily. I would actually venture to say that your blast bones, since the patch update, the way it closes it's to the target is faster than this ability. And this closes to the target once it starts its movement. It closes faster than this. This is very easy to dodge, and that's a problem. And so that would be my largest complaint about that. I do like the fact that on the third attack, it deals 20% additional damage and bounces. And if you look at it, there's no stipulation on there. So when it bounces, it's going to hit for 100% of the damage on the other targets. There's no dissipate. It's not dissipating damage or less damage to the per bounce or anything like that. But getting to the third attack is rough. Um, and so, anyways, that's my thought. This ability at ranged is way too slow when you compare it to a crushing shock that just gets on people immediately. Also, when we're comparing the bonuses of the two classes primary spammables, um, every third cast you're going to get that additional damage boost on that. With crushing shock, you don't get an additional damage boost, but if you hit somebody that is in the middle of casting, it sets them off balance and stuns them. So your primary spammable for a sorcerer can be something that sets people off balance and stuns them. And that makes that the go-to. And literally the only reason I have this on my bar, and I already talked about it, was trying to protect the class identity. I want to be a necromancer, so let's play as a necromancer, not let's not play as a necromancer trying to be a sorcerer. And so if I really wanted to, I would put Force Shock on there, do the same amount of damage once this is leveled up, and I would, go with Crushing Shock, and that would be my primary spammable. We would switch to a or a Flame Staff, and we would start trying to play like a Sorcerer. So anyways, that's my food for thought on the primary spammables. There's the same cost. You get more damage out of the Ricochet Skull on the third cast, and especially if they're in a group, that's great. But setting people off balance and stunning them in PvP is more viable, more beneficial, I should say. And I don't care about the additional damage, I care about the function. So set them off balance and stun them with Crushing Shock is the way to go. And then it comes down to speed, the speed of the attack, and this thing is slow. So the next thing we're going to compare is Stalking Blast Bones to Crystal Frags. And it's not a fair comparison, but when we look at the top three abilities that we're going to be comparing, Ricochet Skull versus Crushing Shock, Stalking Blast Bones versus Crystal Frags, and Skeletal Mage versus Haunting Curse. That's the best comparison we can do when we're trying to compare these attacks. The problem with Stalking Blast Bones is this. I'm glad that they fixed the gap close speed. That's great. But 2.5 seconds. A lot of things can happen in 2.5 seconds. And when you compare this, this is 13k damage, but you have to wait 2.5 seconds for it. Okay. Crystal Frags is 17k. It's 17,300. I'm looking at the same build on both people. Okay, and unbuffed. Okay, that's what we're comparing here. So Crystal Frags is 17,300 damage because it's a 13k tooltip, but we're not going to be just hard casting it. We're going to wait until it procs, and then we're going to cast it. So it's 13k base, but it does 33% more damage when it procs, and it's instant cast. And it's very fast. It gets to them. You don't have to wait 2.5 seconds for that 17k damage. It's on them. Okay, and the thing to note about that is the cost is actually for a Crystal Frags to hard cast it is the same as our Stalking Blast Bones. So I do want to look at that. Yeah. So Crystal Frags ends up being about 50 more Magicka. Okay, but it's 17,300 damage instantly. Okay, so that's important to know. I guess you could say, well, I have more uptime on my Stalking Blast Bones because I can cast it whenever I want. But if you've played a sorcerer, you know that crystal frags procking happens a lot, and it's instantaneous, and it's fast, and it's a lot of upfront damage. And upfront damage is the name of the game in PvP. Um, so we got a slow spammable, and we've got a slow burst. You know, I guess if we consider crystal frags is some burst damage for sure, then we're going to say that this is our Magicka Necromancer's burst, and it's not really a burst when it takes 2.5 seconds to actually head to the target. And it'll jump to the target, and it will run for a ways to chase them too. It's nowhere near crystal frag speed, so slow and slow, that's a problem. And I took this off my bar, and I'll probably have to add it onto my bar. I wasn't happy with the results from it, mostly because PvP. But um, the best thing that you can compare Haunting Curse on a Sorcerer to is the Skeletal Mage. Skeletal Mage, if you look at this tooltip, it's 2700 damage. And it's every 2 seconds for 16 seconds. So 8 seconds total, it's going to do that. So you take 8 times that, and it takes you to 21,000 damage. Haunting Curse, with the same gear setup, unbuffed or whatever, Haunting Curse has got a tooltip of 12.3, so 12,300 damage, but it hits twice. So it's a total of 24,600 damage. 24,600 damage, and there is a delay on the Haunting Curse. Um, Haunting Curse also does splash damage to everyone within 4 meters of it. It does 5k splash damage to whoever you put that on. So assuming that they don't cleanse it, um, you know, you've got 24k guaranteed damage coming into them with both explosions and some damage going out to everyone else. So if you looked at the Skeletal Mage, it's 21k damage, but the mage attacks the closest enemy every 2 seconds. You're not controlling this mage. You can summon it, and you can summon it with somebody in your reticle or who you're targeting. But if a Stam DK comes up on you and starts dizzy swinging you from behind, the target you were about to kill is not the Skeletal Mage's primary target. He's now attacking the person behind you, and you missed out on a kill. And so that's a problem. Also, if you look at this, this is a dot. This is a dot. This is not upfront damage. This is not a big explosion. This is not a burst. And burst is the name of the game in PvP. You want to line up your burst and get people out of the way and move on to the next. And so Skeletal Mage is the closest thing we have to the damage output of Haunting Curse, and it's, you know, a dot. So it's spread over time, and they can out heal it, they can outmaneuver it, and this Skeletal Mage can decide to attack someone else altogether. So I took that off my bar, and we went with the Agony Totem, so that way we could build our house. When we're comparing classes too, sorcerers have a class execute, and so Endless Fury is the execute that I use, and it'll do 2700 upfront damage when I cast it on someone, but if their health falls below the 20% threshold, it'll explode for 13k damage. Plus it does splash damage of 2700 to everyone around it. So, and if I execute someone successfully, which you regularly do in PvP. If you watch any of my videos, that's how I'm getting a lot of my kills. I'm lining up my burst, putting a lot of damage into them, making sure that I have Endless Fury on them, and boom, they're gone. Um, Endless Fury returns 4,800 Magicka every time it successfully, or every time it executes someone. So it becomes a great sustain tool. 4,800 Magicka every time you execute. Necromancer doesn't have a class execute, and that's a problem. We have to wait for our primary spammable to get to the target to hit them. It's very slow, and we have to wait for this guy to get to him. And you know, he's faster now. That's great, but 2.5 seconds before that happens. And then if this were our next offensive ability. It's just a dot. That's all it is, you know, and it can be easily out healed if it stayed on one target the entire time. And if someone got closer than the target you were aiming at, and it decided it was going to shoot at someone else, now you've lost your ability to put damage into somebody, and so that's a problem. No class execute, and the closest thing that we have is death knell. Increase your critical strike chance against enemies under 25% health for by 5% for each Grave Lord ability. So if I put some points into that, right now it's saying that I'd have 10, we could drop 2 points in it. So I would get a 20% critical strike chance against somebody under 25% health. That's the closest thing I have to an execute, and that's just, I can't line up damage against people, and I can't put them away. So that's a long, painful death. And then when we're comparing CCs, um, so obviously, Streak and Bolt Escape on a Sorcerer make Sorcerer far superior. Far superior. The mobility that comes with getting you out of trouble with Streak and Bolt is needed. This class needs something like that badly. Okay, it has no way to get out of trouble, and you can make an argument. Well, run Vampire and use Elusive Mist, and that doesn't help my sustain at all. It doesn't help me with the other problems of lining up Burst against my target and things like that. So it just hurts my sustain. I might be able to reposition with Mist, but it's not going to change the outcome, I don't think. So anyways, Streak and Bolt Escape on a Sorcerer make the class far superior, and Streak is also instant CC, which we do not have an instant CC on this ability. You could even say Crushing Shock is an instant CC as long as it's hitting somebody that's casting something too. So if I were to, I could add Crushing Shock to this, class, and I might have to just to be competitive. But anyways, Streak is an instant CC, and my CC takes 2 seconds before it goes, so that's a problem. We usually need our CC when we're trying to line up damage or line up burst. And so it's been a kind of an overall theme for this class compared to a Sorcerer. Sorcerer is a lot of upfront damage with instant gratification. Crystal Frags proccing instantly with crazy additional burst, and you can streak through people and get instant CCs, and we have Endless Fury, so we can execute people as soon as we burst them. So anyways, this class needs mobility, and there's a couple things you could do to get that, and a couple sets you could do to get that, but it'll be nowhere near what a sorcerer has. The other thing too is I can't remember the ability for a sorcerer, but basically it does the crystal fragments on the ground, and it CCs them or locks them in place. I don't know why I can't think of the ability, but anyways, this class does have a similar ability when it's morphed, and that's the Grave Grasp. And I might actually unlock this and get this going to see, so that way we have a route, and it would be an instantaneous route, and that might be actually more valuable to me than Agony Totem, waiting 2 seconds for that to happen. So we're going to play around with that a little bit more as I keep trying to find the sweet spot for the class, while still trying to protect its identity. And so my overall, after going through that, obviously I'm not trying to trash the class. I'm just trying to say, when you compare it to Sorcerer, we're trying to play both of them at range, and we're trying to protect their class identity, I guess. Sorcerer more mobile. It's got quicker and heavier hitting attacks, and feels really good. And Necro's got slower spammables. Stalk Bones, Blast Bones is slower, and our hard CC Agony Totem is slow because it takes 2 seconds to execute. And we have no execute as far as a class ability goes. And our Skeletal Mage, while it will do 21k damage or whatever when you're buffed up, you don't get to dictate which target it's hitting, and so lining up amount of damage on a particular target is rough. So I would say 70% of the BGs that I did were brutal. It was very hard to play this class when you don't have a front line. If your front line's out there in front of you and keeping people off of you, you can do work and get some kills. If your front line is not keeping people off of you, you're spending a lot of time on your back bar and hoping and praying that you're able to withstand everything for your ultimate to get up, and then you can actually kind of try and turn the tide and try and do some damage, put pressure into people, and that's the play right now. Now, can I build a Magicka Necromancer tank? Absolutely. And actually, the video that I had a Magicka Necromancer tank in it. You might not get a lot of kills. You could line up a ton of assists. And actually, one of the heavy armor versions that I went 1-1 in it in like 26. Super hard to secure kills, but I was in the mix the whole time and hard to kill and an annoyance to people. But not what I was looking for. I was trying to put something bursty together that could try and line up damage. And can we hang? What do we look like when we're going versus the sorcerer damage? Output. Anyways, that is my 2 cents plus one on this build. I'm going to keep playing and I'm going to keep trying to figure this out. And thanks for watching and enjoy the BG footage.